Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Essential NFL Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Clinton, and this is the Essential NFL Podcast, where we're talking all things roster movement, film evaluation, everything happening in the NFL. So on today's show, I'm going to be talking about a Justin Fields evaluation, just looking back and running back through everything in my mind as we look at Chicago's decision here with the number one overall pick. So I'm going to get into that in just a minute here, but quickly wanted to comment on three pretty big pieces of roster news at this point with the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, and then the Denver Broncos. And in all three of these instances, we can talk about how some deals that were made in the past force some deals that were made in recent days, right? So, first off, the Buffalo Bills moving on from center Mitch Morse, safety Jordan Poyer, and cornerback Tre'Davious White, which was a big surprise. Now, if you're following the Essential NFL Substack newsletter, you'll note that we talked about the Bills signing David Edwards to an extension. Now, I didn't quite read the tea leaves as well as I should have there, because that probably portended that they were going to cut Mitch Morse and try to shuffle some things around inside, which is the plan in Buffalo to save some money on that interior offensive line. I thought that Morse might still be around there. What was surprising to me about the Buffalo move is that they elected to restructure Rasul Douglas's contract and keep him as an outside cornerback rather than Tre'Davious White. Now, White, bigger cap hit. He's coming off that injury. So, but nevertheless, I did think that was an interesting spin on this move. Now, it's just Buffalo really needed to reset, get younger, and they're paying for the sins of that Von Miller contract extension that has really tied them up going into this upcoming offseason. He's still on the books as it stands, and that was going to force a move like this for the Buffalo Bills. The Denver Broncos, of course, cut in Russell Wilson, huge dead cap hit. I mean, this is really just a full-blown disaster for the Denver Broncos. I felt like they needed to make this move a year ago if they were going to make it at all. I think that Sean Payton should have had some level of conviction or enough conviction about which way they wanted to go. Either you went all in like they did in terms of signing free agents like Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey and Zach Allen, or you hit the reset button a year ago and take all that dead cap hit and maybe trade Justin Simmons instead of cutting him today. Instead, they fast forwarded a year and they're really between a rock and a hard place right now in Denver. That's why you see them cutting a Justin Simmons, who's a really good player, even if he is reaching 30. Not the type of player you want to be cutting to get better by any means. So I think that, you're just seeing Denver try to sort this whole situation out. If they can get a rookie quarterback in the draft, they can definitely reset things and get back on track. But short of that, they are in for a rough upcoming year, and we'll see, because it's not going to be good vibes coming out of Sean Payton's second year in Denver if that is the case. So the final note is on Miami defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, and it's just amazing. I was a little bit amazed to see how much surprise there was about Miami not franchise tagging Wilkins, and I totally understand it from a talent perspective, but a lot of people I really respect who cover this NFL stuff, were surprised by this given Wilkins' age and everything. But, as I alluded to in my Miami coverage in the roster reset series, this team has completely over-leveraged themselves, and they didn't have a choice here. When you look at some of the moves they've made, the picks they traded for Tyreek Hill and his top-of-the-market contract, the picks they traded for Bradley Chubb and his top-of-the-market contract, and then the pick you traded for Jalen Ramsey and his top-of-the-market contract, well, there's only so many dollars to go around, particularly when you're trading away, what I think it's, 2 1s and 3 2s in those trades for all those veterans. And the Dolphins essentially just ran out of cap space. They had too many highly paid players on this team, and the roster balance is just really off. They're not getting surplus value on their rookie contracts, short of Devon Achane, who they picked up in the 3rd round last year. So they're just in a very bad spot from a roster management standpoint. General manager Chris Greer, I think, really mismanaged the situation, because this is, the reason the reaction is that way, and there's so much surprise, is that you don't let, guys you hit on in the 1st round hit free agency. After you hit on them, you should have an advantage signing those players moving forward. And instead, Christian Wilkins is hitting the market in the prime of his career, and he's going to get, a top of the market deal, because this is not a Christian Wilkins issue. This is a Miami roster management issue, and they're watching a really good young player walk out the door. And a lot of these players that they've acquired, these older guys, Bradley Chubb picked up another injury, and that's exactly why you can't overload a roster with veterans to this degree, right? So, that's the situation in Miami, and, I heard some speculation, about, whether you have to check into Christian Wilkins in the background, and, I think I understand that in a vacuum, but I think it shows a total lack of appreciation for Miami's 3-year outlook, how this roster is structured in terms of the rookie deals that they're getting any surplus value on, and it just being a very overbalanced roster at this point. So I think that Miami was absolutely right to decide that they could not afford to keep Christian Wilkins in the mix, but that represents a lot of mismanagement because it took a lot of steps to get to the point where you couldn't keep him in-house. All right, so that's it for those roster moves around the league. So let's hop into the Justin Fields discussion here. So to review this whole situation, I went back and watched the last 4 games of the Chicago Bears season, and had seen this all at the end of the season, but wasn't necessarily as locked in on it or looking at it from the perspective of they're going to be making this decision about who to take at number 1. And for starters, I think This might not be, quite the hot take you might want to hear, because I think Chicago's in a good position either way moving forward. But, first off, in terms of the roster around them, on the defensive side, with them franchise tagging Jalen Johnson, the Chicago Bears are in really good shape on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think that you could say that they have any holes, quote unquote, on that side of the ball. They do need to replace Eddie Jackson at safety after they cut him, but that's a manageable situation. They've got, they're set at linebacker. You've got all 3 corners with Johnson, Kyler Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson. And then you've got, enough players on the defensive line, though they will need to either re-sign some rotational guys or add to the mix up front. And then you flip over to the offense, and you've got a couple of talented backs still under contract in Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. DJ Moore is obviously a stud lead wide receiver. Cole Kmet, really solid tight end, 2-way player at tight end and who can line up in line. And then you've got two good offensive tackles where Braxton Jones is just a tremendous value in terms of surplus cap value, probably an average offensive tackle, but he's on a 5th round rookie contract, so that's a big plus. And then Darnell Wright, he can definitely add polish and pass protection, but you felt his presence in the run game. So, definitely a guy who, was already playing solid ball at right tackle, but also shows the physical traits to do a whole lot more in year 2. So I think this offense is in pretty good shape. They could get better on the interior offensive line. They need to add some depth at pass catcher, but those are manageable things. So whoever ends up playing quarterback is going to be in a reasonably good situation in Chicago here, especially with Shane Waldron coming in to coordinate the offense instead of Luke Getsy. We'll talk just a little bit about that in the context of Fields, but I think that Shane Waldron is a more accomplished coordinator at this point. He's put better film out there, I would say, in terms of, creating solutions. So I think that is going to be better for whoever winds up being the quarterback in Chicago moving forward. In terms of Justin Fields, I think the most important thing to remember is that this is still a prospect that we're talking about. Even if he does have 3 years on the NFL field, this is still a player who's very much in a developmental stage. So I think it's important to talk about him that way because, he's definitely not a finished product at this point. In terms of his physical ability, anybody who follows the NFL is aware that this guy is an absolutely electric athlete. I mean, one of the just flat out best athletes in the NFL at any position. And we've seen that in his running prowess. And, you also see it show up in his arm talent when he's dialed in, because this guy can drop some dimes all over the field, and he's developed a pretty impressive highlight reel. So physically, I think that Justin Fields is pretty much all you can ask for. The one thing that I would, flag as a criticism is that in the short game, both, when he's trying to throw a quick screen or just execute a short passing concept, he's got a kind of an elongated delivery in motion, and it really messes up the timing of that. And he also is not playing with necessarily great eye control in some of those short areas. So, that's something that he could definitely improve on physically. If you want to check out some examples of these plays I'm bringing up, you can go check out the Essential NFL newsletter over on Substack, where I've clipped a few of these plays just as an example. But, that's nitpicking, right? And I think that you could actually get rid of some of the downsides there, even if Fields didn't up the urgency in that quick passing game, just by getting him under center more often, because that kind of eliminates that quick slick ball handling that you want to see, that you see from like a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, who's unbelievably quick getting the ball out of his hands on. Now, so in other words, they're not going to be moving on from Justin Fields because of a physical issue. I think that what you really see with Justin Fields is that, he's still just struggling to process the field, and he leaves so many throws out there, and then that's exacerbated by the fact that he is not consistent with his accuracy from down to down. Now, you can also pull up all sorts of great clips of him throwing the ball with great timing, great pace, great accuracy. But at the same time, he just, he'll leave some short, he'll sail a throw here and there. And, when you talk about elite NFL quarterback play, I think it really starts with those guys make the routine throws look routine every single time. And that's an area where Fields could definitely stand to get better. But the bigger concern in terms of his development is just not recognizing open concepts down the field. Again, I've clipped a few examples of this and included them in the Substack article. But, just time and time again, you see Justin Fields, looking in the right direction, and his eye line is on an open receiver, and he's not necessarily under pressure. He just chooses not to throw the ball. And, you would have to sit down with him and go through the film to see what he's seeing and understand why he's not turning the ball loose in those situations. But it's definitely a theme of his game. And that's, a big part of the reason why Chicago's offense feels so chaotic at times, is he's just very, inconsistent with his decisions in that regard. Now, I think that there are, good examples of him fitting some balls into tight coverage where it shows, a little bit of anticipation, but, the caveat on that is it's usually a concept where his anticipated read comes open and he's, kind of locked into the route the whole way rather than, going from 1 to 2 to 3 and then placing the ball really well. So, I think Justin Fields still has a very bright future in the NFL. And if it were in a vacuum and the Bears were just picking at 9, it would be full speed ahead with this guy. And what can we do to help him out? Because I think that from a scheme standpoint, there's definitely a lot you could do. I think it would help Fields a lot to be in more of a Shanahan style offense. And, one thing about that offense is just it defines a lot of your reads, especially in early down passing concepts where they're able to, stay out of some of the downfield passing concepts. And, for a guy who's struggling to process, I think that giving him as many easy concepts within the game. Now, obviously he's going to have to get there someday, but in the meantime, you want to give him as many easy looks as possible, keep building his confidence. And I think that system tends to present easier throws when it's, run well, obviously, that's a key thing. And, and also, on top of that, it would just help to get an offensive coordinator who understands how to do a better job of leveraging Fields' legs as a threat on both running and passing plays. The Bears just, they ran some good stuff in their run game, but they ran a lot of plays in their run game that didn't make sense. And sometimes that's not even runs that involve the quarterback. But, in terms of the runs that did involve the quarterback, I thought that they ran Fields on pure quarterback runs way too often. I think that, those are nice to throw in as a changeup, but if you're going to be running the quarterback, I think that you want to consistently be using the ball fake available to you in the zone read option game, rather than, just turning that running back into an extra blocker and running the quarterback. And, there are also things just with the places they're attacking, the timing of it all, how they're tying the run game to the pass game. All of that was really lacking with Luke Getsy and the Chicago Bears over the past 2 years, really. And there were times where it was just absolutely dismal and they weren't doing it at all. And there were times where things were a little bit better, but even at times when it was better near the end of the season, it was still, I think, below average in terms of matching the scheme to the player's strengths. And, so for instance, if they do move on from Fields, I don't think he ends up with the Raiders. So, all things considered, he should have a bright future. And that means that Chicago has good options either way. But as I watch Fields, I also fully understand why the Bears would want to move on for one of these prospects, whether that be Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels at the top of the draft. I think that Caleb Williams sounds like he's going to be the belle of the ball. Given that you've got the number 1 pick and you have the opportunity to do this, I think that upgrading the type of prospect you have is definitely a good move. Now, you've got to get the right quarterback because, obviously this didn't work last year. It seems like trading down was the right move because the Panthers picked Bryce Young, but it doesn't seem like the right move if the Panthers pick CJ Stroud, right? So you've got to get the right quarterback, but at the same time, I definitely understand if you want to go with a prospect who shows more upside as a passer, processing full field passing concepts and also just delivering the ball with more consistent accuracy, showing just a little more touch than Fields shows. I can get behind that, and I can understand if I'm sitting in Ryan Poles' chair why, even if it means taking Justin Fields as a sunk cost, because it sounds like there's not a ton of trade interest for him around the league, I can understand why you would do that given how much value you've amassed on this team and just move on. Now, at the same time, I could see going with keeping Fields because then you get the King's ransom back in the draft. You could wind up seeing this team. I mean, I'm not sure exactly which offensive tackle prospect it would be. You'd be probably targeting somebody who it could kick inside to guard just because they've got the tackles already. And I don't necessarily see Braxton Jones or Darnell Wright kicking in, but you could see the Bears, wind up adding two blue chip players at the receiver position and the offensive line in the top 10 picks if they trade out of the first pick, and also, pick up some picks down the road to just add to this treasure trove and wind up, building an absolute juggernaut of a roster around Justin Fields. And, we can talk about the cap value and resetting the cap, but, I think at the end of the day, that just washes out, because even if Fields is going to be due a raise, you're going to have all these blue chip prospects on rookie deals. You're going to be getting so much cap surplus from that, obviously it's nice to get the cap surplus from the rookie quarterback, but, you can get it from blue chip players on other parts of the roster as well. So, that part of it would factor in less for me, and it would more just come down to, what do I want to do at quarterback? Because I think that you can sit down with your head coach and Matt Eberflus and your new offensive coordinator and Shane Waldron and really just say, what's most exciting to you? Because we don't have a bad path ahead of us at this point. We have a bunch of really good options. And, whether you guys want Caleb Williams, whether you are, taking an alternate quarterback in the draft, which let's definitely, not just go with the consensus after last year, right? Because, those who would have taken CJ Stroud first overall last year obviously would have been, right. So, we don't want to buy into the popular narrative necessarily. But within that building, I think that they can go either way. Whatever quarterback ends up in Chicago is going to be in a great spot. And I think that Chicago looks like they're going to be a very competitive team heading into next year, regardless of which direction they go at the quarterback position. So, it's going to be hard to stick them ahead of the Packers or the Lions to win the NFC North. I think those are your two favorites in what should be a loaded division. As it stands, maybe the Vikings if Kirk Cousins is back. But at the same time, our assessment of that could change dramatically in the first 3 weeks of the season, because any one of these quarterbacks, whether that's Justin Fields or one of these rookie quarterbacks, could really come out in the first 3 weeks of the season and become, an high-level impact player in the MVP discussion. You don't have to look further than Jalen Hurts. I think that you'd be talking about a very talented Chicago offense this year. And, Fields is more than talented enough as a player now, so there's lots of different options. I know that Bears fans, I'm sure there's going to be one right answer, right? That's NFL Twitter. But I think that they're in a really enviable spot because they've just got nothing but good options. Whereas, if you're a team like the Broncos or the Raiders right now, it's a much narrower path to the quarterback. So, that's it. That's it for the Justin Fields take. I guess the last note is I definitely came into this thinking that I was going to be banging the table for keeping Fields and building the roster around him, just because the quarterback prospects are also unknown in the NFL, and Fields has shown a good amount of talent. But, watching through where he's at, and there have been complications with the coaches, but there are areas of his game where he's just not developing. And I could totally understand going with somebody else if you feel like, you're getting one of these, elite guys. So that's it for this edition of the NFL Essential NFL podcast. I'll be back with more coverage as we get into free agency, so follow along, and thanks for checking out the show.